Please welcome to the stage Changpeng Zhou, the CEO of Binance, and Daniel Roberts, Editor-in-Chief of Decrypt.
All right, Changpeng Zhou, CZ, welcome back to Ethereal.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me here.
So you spoke at this event 1 year ago, and I thought a good place to start would be to ask you what has changed for the company. I mean, we know what has changed in crypto. The bull run has continued dramatically. In many ways in the world, a lot hasn't changed. I mean, we're still doing remote work, remote conferences. We're still basically in the pandemic. What do you think when you look around the ecosystem has changed for crypto and for Binance?
Yeah, I think the most notable thing is everything got bigger. I think the industry got bigger. I think actually the COVID situation actually accelerated many of the developments. It forced governments to print more money more quickly, but it also forced people to adopt crypto more quickly. So the crypto industry has seen tremendous growth in the last year. We can look at Bitcoin price. I think around this time last year, I didn't check, but Bitcoin price is probably under 10,000. People are still debating whether Bitcoin is, I think May 4th or May something was the Bitcoin halving. People are still debating whether the halving was going to have an impact, whether we're going to see a price increase the year following that. There was still a lot of debates, but now, well, we now know the answers. It's pretty clear. So we've seen a lot of tremendous growth in the crypto industry. We also seen a lot of growth in the Binance platform. We've seen tremendous user growth with the trading volume growth. Binance also introduced a couple of new initiatives in the last year or so in the Binance ecosystem. The Binance Smart Chain is doing really, really well. So all of those things have happened. So I think we basically overall we've seen a tremendous growth over the last year or so.
Yeah, you talk about the growth, especially in particular your token BNB has surged. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that it surpassed XRP by market cap. Talk to us about how much that actually matters for the success of your business. I mean, does the price of BNB matter day to day? Does it being the number 3 token by market cap matter for Binance in terms of customer acquisition?
Well, I think it definitely helps Binance for sure. So at the beginning, the BNB had value because of Binance. It was a discount token on Binance exchange. But I think right now BNB is evolving into its own ecosystem with multiple blockchains, with a lot of DeFi activity, especially BSC is growing a lot in activity. I think Ethereum is kind of capped by the capacity of the network. So it's always around 1.2 million transactions per day or so. I think that's the maximum you can handle, which basically means that Ethereum is super successful. It's overwhelmingly successful that it's actually capped by its capacity. And Binance Smart Chain offers a cheaper alternative for people who are not able to pay for those fees. So now we see a lot more users come in. But today, I would definitely say the centralized exchange is actually benefiting from Binance Smart Chain, also the BNB price increase. Because I believe the reason price increases are mostly due to Binance Smart Chain, which with the increased user adoption of it, because people need BNB to pay for fees on that, even though the fees are quite low. But people now understand that now this is a network that a lot of people use, and when BNB price goes up, it actually helps Binance.com. It does because there are many other big exchanges have refused to list BNB. Because they think that listing helps us, but because by them not listing, it actually also helps us, because now when BNB price goes up, when people wants to trade, we still have the large Binance.com, the centralized exchange, still have the largest liquidity, and people come back to trade. And the other exchanges are missing a top 3 market cap coin. And on multiple days, the BNB trading volume was higher than BTC trading volume. So it's actually hurting the other exchanges not listing them. So either way, it works for us. If they list, we're happy because BNB gets more adoption. If they don't list, then Binance.com still enjoy most of the sort of centralized liquidity. So it does help us.
You know, you talk about DeFi, and I just wanted to mention, you told Shu Yao Kong, who's one of our columnists at Decrypt back in October, that you thought DeFi was a bubble about to burst. And I just want to ask you if you've reassessed that at all, what you think might happen with DeFi. You said, you know, you personally, even though you've seen the growth, you're not exactly doing much farming of your own. You're not, as they call it, a DeFi degen. Has your thinking changed on the rise of DeFi investing? I mean, people are way down the rabbit hole with this stuff now.
I don't think I've ever said DeFi is a bubble that's guaranteed burst. I usually don't predict futures like that, so that doesn't sound like something I would say. And I think it sounds like something that that may have been a additional interpretation, which is actually slightly off applied to what I said. What I most likely said is I don't use DeFi that much myself, but I do think DeFi will stay. I've always stated that. I don't know how big it will get. I don't know how small it will get, but I think DeFi's use case makes logical sense. It will stay. I actually think it will get pretty big. I actually think that DeFi will overtake CEX at some point. I just don't know when. So I think DeFi has a very high probability of overtaking centralized exchanges soon at some point in the future. So I don't think I've ever said that I think DeFi is a bubble that will just burst and go away. That may have been a misinterpretation of something I said, that because I don't use DeFi myself. Look, I'm not a typical user. I run a decent sized business, and I run a fast growing business, which because of this fast growing growthness, has a lot of issues that I got to deal with. So I don't really go and trade on DeFi to make some money or to try to get a yield. That I don't do. So I'm not a typical user. I also don't buy NFTs. I don't browse NFTs. I'm not an art collector, even though I am very interested in the technology. What I'm interested in is really to look for ways to provide platforms or provide tools for people to access those technologies. And that's what I do. I'm a tools maker. So that's kind of my interest. So maybe that's been taken out of context, saying that I don't think I've ever said DeFi is a bubble that will burst and go to zero. I don't think I would ever say that.
Let's talk about, well, and by the way, something either cooling off or being a bubble doesn't necessarily equate to going to zero. Yeah. You know, a lot of people think that the NFT boom right now is a bubble, and I'd love your thoughts on that, especially as, you know, here we are chatting. You guys just announced recently you're going to launch an NFT platform. Yep. What will it look like for an exchange to get into the NFT game? And what do you say to people who they see those rising prices right now for some NFTs and they say, there's no way this is sustainable?
Yeah. So, okay, I may have said that DeFi may have been maybe in a bubbly state at some point. Again, I agree with you. It does not mean that I think it will go away completely. Different people have different definitions of bubbles. How we define a bubble is very subjective, right? Did Bitcoin go through a bubble in 2018? Probably yes, but by most common definitions, it went to 20,000. It came down to about 3,000 at multiple times, and then. But like, so for some people, that's just normal volatility for a relatively small market cap asset. For some people, that's a bubble. So that's the definition itself is relatively subjective. So getting back to NFTs, so again, this is a new sector a new subsector of crypto that's based on the numbers, is definitely gaining attraction. So we want to provide tools for people to access that. And I think for so far, many of the solutions are on-chain NFTs. So basically, there's a website which provides people access to some things, but all the transactions happen on-chain. And on Ethereum, many of them are happening on Ethereum right now. Some are starting to happen on Binance Smart Chain. But we want to offer look. We have a very large user base. We probably have one of the largest active user bases in the crypto world. On the centralized exchange, we want to provide basic users that may or may not know how to use blockchain or how to like sign transactions using their MetaMask wallet or etc. We want to give those guys NFTs as well. So those guys so we want to give people a different way, a large group of people who have traditionally proven to want to use centralized exchanges, access to NFTs. So that was the recent announcement for the centralized platform running and providing an NFT platform. That should come out in about a month or so. So that's the thinking behind it. But for me, it's really an experiment. So if it gets adoption, then great. If it doesn't get adoption, we may shelve that project, etc. But I do think that NFTs have a very high chance of also staying. I think that fundamentally NFTs open up the fundraising or monetization mechanism for artists and content creators that wasn't available to them in fiat currencies before. So now you can sell your content, your creation, for people globally in the world. And with this, we're seeing just in the I took a very quick look at the what their business development pipeline. I don't think I saw any major publications, any major newspapers and TV, movie makers names missing. Like everyone wants to issue NFTs. So based on that, I think I actually underestimated the potential market size for NFTs. I think NFTs is just at the beginning, but look, it'll be very highly volatile in terms of price. Some people will call it bubble. We will see probably multiple bubbles potentially, depending on how you define bubbles. But I think we'll see high volatilities in the NFT market because it's so new.
Well, and when you talk about the possibilities for NFTs, I've heard some people describe them as maybe the latest entry point to crypto. And what's interesting there is just the other day you were doing an AMA on YouTube, and you were asked kind of one of the hottest topics right now about Bitcoin, which is it still just digital gold, or is it ever going to be really used as a currency? You've got companies that are saying, hey, you can now pay in Bitcoin. And what I always say is, well, why would you want to spend your Bitcoin? I mean, as the price keeps going up, people don't want to spend it. And you said you still think that Bitcoin is the entry point, the kind of gateway to crypto. And it's just interesting to hear some people framing NFTs that way. I guess I'd ask your current thinking on, what's the best way to bring newcomers to the space? Is it the OG Bitcoin, which is digital gold? Maybe it's NFTs, although they have been very controversial too, with the environmental impacts, some of which has been kind of, poorly framed. Copyright issues. What do you really own when you buy an NFT? So how's that going to shake out?
Sure. I think there's a couple points I want to sort of echo to there. Might be a long answer. So first of all, I think on the last part, the NFT part, I think NFTs definitely allowed content creators to monetize from the existing crypto community. So Vignesh, he goes by Metacoven and pays $69 million US for Beeple's art, which basically is a landmark event now. It's a very strong signaling to artists. Look, you can make very good money. But with all the artists coming in, many of the artists have very strong followings in the traditional space. Now they're saying that, well, now I'm selling an NFT. I'm selling an NFT, and they will advertise that to their fan base, which a large part of them, probably 99% of them, are not in crypto yet. And so that will bring those users into crypto. That would be so. Then for those guys, the NFT is the first entry point for them. When I mentioned Bitcoin as the first entry point, most people learning about blockchains, learning about crypto, they usually learn about Bitcoin first, and then they will use. And once they learn about Bitcoin, if they like it, they will probably buy Bitcoin first before the other. Or hopefully, they will buy Bitcoin first because that's relatively the least risky and the least volatile in terms of all the cryptocurrencies so far, based on their market cap. So, but the two is not in conflict. I think some people will come in because of Bitcoin. Some people will come in through Bitcoin. Many people will now come through NFTs. NFTs actually DeFi actually did not attract a lot of people outside of the industry because DeFi is like really advanced users within crypto already. The guys who know how to operate their wallets, how to interact with smart contracts, etc. Whereas NFTs are artists who are now not really in crypto. They are advertising to their followers. So that's a really interesting aspect to it. And then I think whether we define crypto as a gold replacement or a currency or things like that, that again depends on everyone's definition. People define terms differently. I actually really don't care. I care more about the properties of crypto. Yes, it can be used as a form of payments. It can be used as a currency. It can be used as a speculative asset for people to trade against. It can be used as a commodity. So, I mean, I don't really care. People can define however they define. But for me, the thing is, what properties does it have? What can I use it for? And does it have value? So those are the things I care about. But I do think the NFTs are able to bring a much larger group of users from outside of crypto into crypto now, and that will be very good for our industry as well.
Let's stick with the idea of first-time crypto buyers, especially a few weeks ago with Coinbase going public. You have a lot of people out there who might be ready to buy Bitcoin or some other coin, but to your point, probably Bitcoin first for the first time. And I'd ask you, there's so many exchanges out there now. I mean, you guys have gotten so big. We can talk about size. You're the biggest in the world by trading volume. Just recently discovered that FTX is out there saying that FTX is the biggest exchange in the world outside of China. Coinbase says it's the biggest in the US. Yeah, I guess I'd ask you, separate from just size, How do you pitch Binance to a first-time buyer? Why should they go to Binance instead of going to Coinbase, Kraken, Gem?
Okay, I think I lost your voice there for a tiny bit, but that's okay. Well, I think Binance. I think everybody wants to claim that they're the biggest exchange. We actually always say Binance is one of the biggest exchanges in the world. We don't say we are the biggest exchange. Depending on how you measure it, there's many different ways to segregate markets, but globally we are by far, I think, by trading volume, by number of active users, by third-party web traffic analysis, by mobile downloads, we are by far the largest in all of those metrics I mentioned. So we do provide a very solid platform that can handle very high volumes at a very high speed. Most other platforms do not have that same level of technology. And for exchanges, you do want to use a large one because the larger ones the larger ones do make money. Number one, they're profitable, sustainable, solid businesses. You don't want to use exchange that's not profitable because then they have a lot of interest to dip their hand into customer funds and also do rug pulls or runaways. The large exchanges do spend a lot more money on security measures. This is our number one cost, our number one spending. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars on security measures alone each year. The larger exchanges are more secure in that sense. And and I think basically we have been suffering on customer support for the last little while. We used to have pretty decent, we used to have industry-leading customer support. We actually pushed the benchmark up a few times. When Binance first started, most people wait for like months for a customer support response. We pushed that to 1 day, maximum 1 day, usually within a couple of hours. And then a lot of users flocked to us, and then the industry followed. But right now, we're seeing the next exponential wave of users coming in. So we're not able to scale customer support that quickly for the last few months, but we are scaling it. And so now we have finally drained most of our backlog on customer support. So our customer support is getting back to being responsive again. But by all those matrices, we are the most popular choice for other people. That's probably for most other people around the world. So that's probably a good reason for people to use us.
I mentioned Coinbase, and what's interesting is a few months ago, Coinbase came out and said, we are now a decentralized company. We no longer are headquartered in San Francisco. We don't have a headquarters. And of course, I knew I'd be talking to you, and you guys have taken flack for not really saying where the headquarters are. You said, we don't have a headquarters. Now, a year ago at Ethereal, you also said, wherever I sit, that's the Binance office. Has your answer on that changed? If you're in, say, Singapore, is it headquartered in Singapore? Do you guys still not say you have a headquarters?
Right. So this again deals with one of those definition problems. What I would call it, because everybody's definition of a headquarter of a company is slightly different. So most people have in their minds, and most people's definition of centralization versus and decentralization, the two separate terms, are also different. So again, this is all terminology definition issues. So most people think about a company, they think about a headquarters, an office, a bank account, a registration, etc. But today you can run organizations with probably none of those. But most people still have in their heads the concept of a team working together must be a company, and the company must have a headquarters. But when you ask how you define a headquarters, is that an office that people sit? Is that an office I sit in a lot of the times? I work from home for the last 3.5 years. And I've been traveling around the world for the last 3.5 years. Our leadership team are not sitting in one office. We don't have a clear place where we can go by most people's normal definitions of a headquarters that we can call a headquarters. And so when people ask me, I can't give them I don't want to give them a wrong answer just to satisfy their definition. I don't want to tell them, look, I don't want to tell them, look, it's San Francisco, it's Tokyo, it's Beijing, it's wherever. I honestly don't have an answer when they ask, where's your headquarters? We don't really have a headquarters. What's interesting is if they ask, do we have a bank account? Well, we don't have we have a few bank accounts now, but none of them are sort of the corporate bank account. So we don't really. We started as a crypto to crypto exchange. We settle everything in crypto. So we don't have a bank account. So there's a lot of traditional definitions that doesn't really apply when new types of organizations form. And Binance is actually a new type of organization to the point where we internally when we talk to the internal team. we say the Binance team. We don't say we don't use the word company and employee internally that much. And then we talk about decentralization, right? So that's very different. People have different definitions of that. Some people define it as no headquarters, we're decentralized. Great. We would love to claim that. Some people says no bank account, we're decentralized. Some people says no company registered, we're decentralized. We're just a project that's incentivized by the token economics. Some people say, well, no, if you have a leader, if the founder is still around, then you're not decentralized, like, with Ethereum, Binance, because then they still have a very large influence. Well, okay, that could be another definition. Can't argue if right or wrong. Some people says if the mining power is concentrated, then it's not decentralized. Some people says if the coin distributions like Dogecoin, one address holds 27% of all the coins available, then that's not decentralized. Yep. So there's so many different matrices that you can go on, and everyone have, like, this is saying like the largest exchange, like by which metric, right? So so many people have different definitions of things, but I think fundamentally though, a smart, sophisticated person should look beyond that and say, look, it's just a level of decentralization. When they talk about we're decentralized, what do they mean? Okay, they mean they don't have headquarters. Great. That's a form of decentralization. As long as they understand that, that's okay. Yeah.
We're talking about geographic locations. Let's talk a little bit about Binance US. You guys just named Brian Brooks, the CEO. He's going to be speaking here at Ethereal next. What's the goal in the US? And when people see something like a Brian Brooks hire, they have to think this is a move to kind of play nice with regulators and try and beef up the strategy for US regulation.
Yeah, so I think so. So many people have a misconception of Binance because we didn't start in the US. Everyone thinks that Binance doesn't want to comply with US or any regulations, etc. People think we're doing regulation arbitrage, etc. But that's totally off. So Binance is actually the most compliant organization in the world, I think, in the crypto space. We have multiple regulated entities in multiple places, and we're applying for more licenses in many jurisdictions. So our philosophy is never to, we never want to go against the law. We would never want to go against the regulations. We just started in an industry that was relatively nascent when we started. In 2017, there wasn't much regulations about ICOs, about listing tokens, definition of new ICO token. There still isn't, right? So, but in the US though, now there's a very clear playbook given that Coinbase IPO'd. So now in the US, in one of the world's most advanced economies, a cryptocurrency exchange can IPO on NASDAQ. That's humongous. So now there's a very clear playbook, at least so for I think by any common understanding, that's fairly legit. That's fairly regulated. If we do everything they do, then there shouldn't be any problems. So now there's a playbook in the US where I think in the US it's easy to copy. And also outside of the U.S., it's many countries probably will copy many of the regulations that U.S. Adopted. Historically, they've been doing this. And for the U.S. specifically, I want to allude to one fact that most people don't know about. So Binance US started about late 2019, so just still less than 2 years. And it only has licenses for 40 states, 41, 42 states. So it doesn't have licenses to operate in the other like 8 or 9 very large states, including New York, California, etc. And but even with those limitations, it's a much smaller product than Binance.com. Even with those limitations, on the day of the Coinbase IPO, Binance US's trading volume was 40% of Coinbase's trading volume. So and that percentage has been on the uprise for the past little while. So even with severe limitations, they were actually able to grow market share quite quickly, and because the fees there is very low, they charge about 1/5 of the fees of Coinbase. So we brought Brian on because we were very lucky that he's available at this time. He just left the office and looking for, and sort of he became available. And so but we want to show that we take compliance very, very seriously, but we also want to grow the business. I think Brian is one of those very unique individuals that has a very strong compliance background and compliance credibility, but also a very pro-crypto. He understands crypto deeply, and he understands the business deeply. And he's a very sharp individual. He's like And I think he's very strong. He's a very strong leader as well. His strong opinion. He's got the energy. He's got the aggressive push. So we want to see him. We want to bring him on and see how he takes where he takes that business. So so Brian will step in and lead the Binance US efforts, and we think that will not only lead us to more regulatory compliance, but we will lead the business into multiple dimensions that it may not have been before, and we should see significant growth out of that.
We'll get to hear more from him next, which will be great. I want to make sure I ask you a bit more about BSC, Binance Smart Chain. You mentioned it earlier. I think probably because of the rise of NFTs, we have seen in the last year more of these what look like copycat projects on BSC. You have versions of hash masks called bash masks. There's CryptoPunks, and then there's Binance Punks. One of these even shut down after a few days. It was called Musical Beats, and it looked a lot like an Ethereum project, Euler Beats. Yeah. What's the deal there? What do you say about that? I mean, there's only kind of so much protecting of original ideas that people can do in a decentralized industry, some say.
So I think this is one of the things, right? So in a decentralized world, it's very difficult to protect somebody from copying you. But to be honest, I think this in the I recently read in a book by the co-founder of Square. I think Jim McKenzie or something.
McKelvey.
Jim McKelvey, Innovation Stack. So you obviously read his book. In his book, he says, in this world, everything is a copy of something else. We always make incremental improvements on top of what people's previous innovations are. So even if you look at humans, we are a copy of our parents, and everything in the world is a copy of something. Ethereum did not invent blockchain. Ethereum copied blockchain from Bitcoin. Vitalik probably did invent smart contracts, EVMs, but the concept may or may not be his original one, because smart contracts was talked about, DAOs, etc., was talked about in the Bitcoin days. So I think, and also so none of those projects you mentioned actually know much about or evolved. But in a decentralized world, right? So you have Ethereum, and we made Binance Smart Chain. The Binance Smart Chain is a Ethereum virtual machine compatible blockchain, and obviously people will look at what's popular on Ethereum and try to copy it onto on BSC. So that's a very natural thing for people to do. Like, why would you go if? And this is the same thing, right? If some startup projects popular in the U.S. and they're blocked in China, guess what? The Chinese people are trying to do a copycat within China. China is a huge market. It has like 1/5 of the world's population, and why not, right? So that's why there's a copy of Google, there's a copy of Facebook, there's a copy of Twitter, there's a copy of pretty much everything you can imagine. There's a copy of PayPal. So that's quite natural. People and it's impossible to protect concepts. I think the copyright laws, patents work, but they're typically very difficult. Applying for a patent takes like 18 months or something, right? Those processes are very old, very old. I think the best way to protect against your innovations is to continue to innovate more on that faster than the other guys, and always make the right decisions. Look, PancakeSwap overtook Uniswap volume by 2x now. So for a long time, Uniswap was the Uniswap probably did invent the automated market makers, the liquidity pools, etc. So that's great. But look, in a decentralized world, your concepts will be copied very quickly. It's all execution ability. And if you look, honestly, if you stay on a blockchain that costs like $100 per transaction, you're not going to get that many users. Whereas, and so I encourage people to develop on both blockchains actually, because it's 100% compatible. Just got to deploy another contract. That's probably the best way to fend off any copycats. Because if you deploy on both blockchains, then you give users access to on both. And I think, look, Ethereum 2.0 will come out sooner or later. I think Vitalik's much quieter now. I would assume that he's much quieter on Twitter. So I would assume that he's working really hard on Ethereum 2.0, which I think will be really good for the industry, because he's a genius, and he'll come up with something that'll be super. That probably will be super impressive, and and that'll be good for the industry growth.
You mentioned Twitter, CZ. I wish we had so much more time, but it's a good transition. I want to end on a couple fun questions for you. What do you say about the price surge of Dogecoin, especially because it's something that was created as a joke and it's pumped on Twitter, especially by with big followings like Elon Musk, and you've got Mark Cuban tweeting about it. You know, you've got a big persona on Twitter. What do you say to people who say that there's something I can't really wrap my mind around here because it was just created as a joke?
Yeah, so I think welcome to decentralization. I think in the decentralized world, have the view that there will be many things that I cannot wrap my head around. Give it like I could not I'm like you, I couldn't wrap my head around Dogecoin. But look, I accept it that it's a fun coin. It is decentralized in the sense that it was abandoned project, like the founders no longer working on it. So it's actually more decentralized that way compared to even Ethereum or Binance or Binance coins, etc. Because there's still a founder that's still an active founder. So I mean, Elon Musk and Mark Cuban are free to tweet what they like, and their followers that follow them, they're free to buy the coins that they want to buy. And the price goes up. The price goes up. Is I didn't expect it, but there's many things that I didn't expect or couldn't understand. But look, it's decentralized world. I gotta accept it.
Let's end on this. We're talking about people's personas, and I think you have a big one in the space. You know, Binance has its size and its followers and its fan base, and also its controversies. I was talking to someone in crypto recently, and he said that, and he meant this flatteringly, but he said he sees you as being like the Leonardo DiCaprio character in Catch Me If You Can. What do you make of that, CZ?
So many people put many personas on me, but that's usually one small aspect or one small exaggeration of an aspect of me. So yeah, I mean, I do travel around the world, and we are in an industry that's relatively new. Not in most parts of the world, the regulations are still somewhat unclear. So we do have to negotiate a little bit in different on what kind of products we can offer and not offer. So there's a little bit of that, but I think, but if they know me well, actually, I'm very I'm actually very non-confrontational. So I don't really confront. I don't really cause trouble with any with any law, any regulators, any police, anybody in authority. I'm not a pure libertarian, so I'm not trying to upend the government. I don't think we can live in a society with no rules, and I don't think our society is advanced to the point where we can just live together harmoniously with no sort of third-party enforcement or just rule keeping. So yeah, so I'm not an extremist, but people on Twitter often they only understand a little part of me, and then they sort of kind of enlarge that aspect of the persona, which is fine, which is fun. So I think basically I take a pretty light view. People trying to make memes of me, making different personas. Yeah, some people put actually a couple of years ago, people made a meme of me in the Wolf of Wall Street movie. I think that's great, but we're not really operating like that. But those things may give people a wrong perception. That's okay. It's only a small part of the it's only a small population out there, but it happens, and we can't really try to correct it. People just understand what they understand.
That can apply to almost the entire industry. So it's a great way to end. CZ, thanks so much.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me, and thanks to everyone for watching.
All right, talk again soon.
Cheers. Yeah.
Ok, vừa rồi chúng ta cũng đã vừa theo dõi hội nghị Ethereal, và cảm ơn các bạn đã ghé thăm và tham khảo, và thân ái chào tạm biệt và hẹn gặp lại các bạn trong buổi livestream tiếp theo.